Aotearoa, New Zealand was a predominantly forested country before people arrived. Forests extended to the limits of where trees could grow. Even some of the driest parts of the country, in central Otago and across the Canterbury Plains, supported woody vegetation, albeit open woodland and shrubland. Non-forest communities were largely restricted to the mountain ranges, especially in Te Waipunamua's South Island, although sites recently disturbed by floods. Landslides and volcanic eruptions would have been temporarily free of forest until succession saw forest dominate again. Aotearoa, New Zealand forests are incredibly diverse in structure and composition, reflecting both our geological history and the climatic and topographical variability of the landscape. While ancestors of some of our forest biota are of Gondwanan origin, for many other species, their ancestors reached Aotearoa, New Zealand through long-distance dispersal after the Oligocene marine transgression 25 million years ago. Whatever their origins, the plant, animal, and fungal species we see in our forests today are very much the product of the environmental upheavals of the last few million years, during which Aotearoa, New Zealand has experienced multiple glacial events and repeated earthquakes and volcanism. Our forests did not undergo the relatively orderly advances and retreats that occurred in the Northern Hemisphere. Instead, small isolated pockets of forest survived at the height of glacial advances and quickly coalesced as conditions became more equable before being fragmented again during the next phase of adverse conditions. This, together with the incredibly dynamic tectonic environment and our geographical location between the circumpolar westerly winds and subtropical cyclones, would have driven the evolution of our modern forest biota and the relationships that occur among its species, collectively shaping forest composition and structure today. Since humans reached Aotearoa, New Zealand, our forests have been decimated, especially by fire and felling. These processes have now largely ceased, and the absolute area of native forest is greater today than it has been for many decades. We also have a government agency, Department of Conservation, or DOC, tasked with specifically managing the majority of our native forests for biodiversity conservation. But despite these factors, our remaining native forests are still being degraded. The ravages of herbivores, deer, goats, possums, etc., predators, mustelids, rodents, possums, etc., weeds, and increasingly climate change are having massive impacts. While the effect of predators on forest birds are well known, the more subtle but likely more consequential and ongoing impacts of herbivores on forest composition and structure are often underestimated. Many of our smaller forest remnants are being invaded by weeds, for example blackberry, old man's beard, ginger, although more extensive forests are still relatively free of their effects.